Mom is furious when she finds out that her child's teacher taped a mask to her kid's face. Silly teacher, she didn't realize that the teachers union handbook called for staples. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. We are the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today's show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. MyPillow is always offering great deals, and this week you can save $70 on a 6-piece towel set. All you have to do is use the code Dr. Duke, that's DRDUKE, and get this wonderful 6-piece towel set for just $40. Visit mypillow.com and save up to 66% on all your other items there, all the other items that they have there. Again, DRDUKE is the code. All right, today we start in Las Vegas, where everything that stays in Vegas is now public, where a mother is furious after her 9-year-old son's teacher humiliated him and other students by taping masks to their face when they forgot to pull them up all the way after getting a drink. Now, this mom, by the way, is very quick to point out she's not against masking. She just doesn't like it that her son's face had tape on it to keep the mask up, and that puzzles me a little bit. All right, so you're okay for the mask mandate. You're not bothered by kids wearing masks. Your kid didn't wear it correctly, and so she put tape on his face. I get it. It's tacky. Is it an end of the world thing? Would you, you're a mom, how would you react to that?
If they put tape on my son's face?
To keep the mask up.
I'd be furious.
This mom of a 4th grade student at Freedom Elementary in Mountain's Edge says his substitute teacher stepped way over the line when the 9-year-old failed to properly wear his mask in class.
He went to get a sip of water, forgot to put the mask on. Teacher then did not tell him to put it back on or send him to the office. She instead pulled him up in the front of the classroom in front of all of the students, and she then taped the mask across the top of his face.
The mom says the sub added a second layer of tape from his nose to his forehead, and with tape still on his face, he went to the office to pick up homework he'd forgotten at home and his dad dropped off.
When he went to the office to pick up that homework is when one of the administrators noticed the tape on his face.
Alarmed, that administrator took the tape off of the child and alerted the principal, who went to the classroom to investigate, filling out this report.
And she saw another student who she thought was my son with tape on their face as well.
The part that I guess makes me more upset, and you have to think about, is the fact that this has been going on, apparently, according to the story, regularly since the beginning of the semester. And this was a substitute teacher. So my question is, we are a couple weeks into the semester. Do you not have an actual room teacher for that class, that it's been a substitute, and that the fact that that's like, it's the first couple weeks where kids have to get acclimated to school, period, again, bring it all in. And from day one, okay, you can't keep your mask on, I guess we're just gonna tape your face up. And it's not just that boy. The fact that other kids are getting taped up. How has this not been reported by other parents before this even happened? I don't understand.
Well, I agree with that 100%. These high schools, middle schools are taking way too many liberties with your kids' personal space. Whether it's the masks, I think is a huge overstep, or taping them, or how many shows have we done over the last couple of years of the way that the boundary between the child and the teacher or some administrator, we have teachers spanking kids, right? We've got other teachers engaging in slapping kids, or we have a bus driver, a video of a bus driver who was so upset at a child for not wearing the mask correctly, he slapped the little girl. So these things are all of this transformation taking place in our public schools. In a way, not only are teachers acting like the moral directors of the children, they're acting like the parents in other ways as well, and that includes corporal punishment and physically touching children, taping their faces, or spanking them, or slapping them on a bus. How comfortable they are really becoming intimately willing to put their hands on children. It's kind of creepy.
Well, and according to the mom, she is considering the pressing of charges and wanting that substitute teacher removed. But at this point across the country, we know we have the teacher shortage, as they say, or that teachers just don't want to go back to the classroom. So they need to hold on to every substitute teacher they possibly have because there is no one else. So it's from the school's position, they're probably thinking, well, it's either we keep the taping abusive substitute teacher, or I don't know, the administrator is going to actually have to go sit in the classroom and watch the kids. Either way, education is not happening. And the mom also said she is considering moving her son, to a different public school or potentially a charter school. So
if you believe the mask is necessary, if you think the mask is okay, you have no problem with your kid being strapped up to a mask 8 hours a day in school, and a teacher puts some tape on I get it, it's not right, I get it. I just, from the mom's perspective, it seems there's no reaction to the masking, and I'm pulling my kid out and contemplating a law school because of the tape.
If I can't speak to this mom, but it may be as simple as this. The mask mandate concerns every single student in the building, every teacher, everyone. So we're going along with the group. But now my son is being put in front of the classroom, pointed out singularly, not for something good, but for something bad, and then put physical tape on his face, making him feel shame, whereas everyone else is wearing the mask, so he's part of the group. So mom goes along with what the whole group is doing, but now that it's making the son look bad and therefore the mom look bad, then it's a bridge too far.
No, and I think that's a well-explained argument that makes perfect sense. I still take one step back, and it's just hard for me to realize that there are a lot of parents out there who do not see the mask as a problem.
Okie dokie, before we move on, just a reminder that if you enjoy our content, please consider joining the Patriot Club. Your tax-deductible donation literally keeps this show going. Simply visit patriotclub.us to get signed up. That's patriotclub.us. And as a special thank you, we will ship you our brand new American Patriot tumbler etched with the muscular likeness of the very first president of this United States.
Imagine if George Washington came back to life and he was built like a linebacker. That would solve a lot of the problems in this country.
He probably would be. He could be a tight end, I bet. He'd be a good tight end. Anyway, I want you to all know that it is not enough for white people to be considered supremacists and to give up all of everything to minorities. Now, you must take that extra step and commit suicide. Yes, you must. Duquesne University psychology professor Derek Hook said there are merits to the argument that was proposed actually by another professor who argued it would be ethical for white people to kill themselves. So another professor says, hey, white people kill themselves. And Professor Derek Hook took a look at that and said, well, there are merits to this. And so he talked about this in a video that was by the anti-critical race theory group Myth Informed, MKE. It was posted recently and stated, this is part of an anti-racist discussion on nice white therapists that was held by the American Association for Psychoanalysis in Clinical Social Work. So there's Professor Derek Hook again, Duquesne University psychology professor. And the video that he talks about that he's in was actually taken from a summer session, and the content is now unavailable, but don't worry. We got a little bit of something.
He made the assertion that white people should commit suicide as an ethical act. And here's a quote from him directly. The reality in South Africa today is that most white people spend their whole lives only engaging Black South Africans in subservient positions. My question is then, how can a person not be racist if that's the way they live their lives? The only way then for white people to become part of Africa is not to exist as white people anymore. If the goal is to dismantle white supremacy, and white supremacy is white culture, then the goal has to be to dismantle white culture and ultimately white people themselves. The total integration into Africa by white people will also automatically then mean the death of white people, as white as a concept would not exist anymore. So here's the kind of crazy gambit of this talk. I want to suggest that psychoanalytically, we could even make the argument that there was something ethical in Delport's statements. Now, I suppose, parenthetically, we could say that Delport's kind of a young, fired-up academic, and maybe, there's a little bit too much of a dramatization in some of his comments. But nevertheless, I want to make the argument that there is some kind of ethical dimension to his provocations. I think that Delport took his white audience to the threshold of a type of symbolic extinction, or at least the contemplation of what that might be. He took them to a proposed end of whiteness. Or, in more psychoanalytic terms, we could say that Delport offered his white audience the opportunity one they didn't seem to appreciate for the most part, but the opportunity to contemplate what we could call the castration of whiteness.
Now, as a professor myself, he's literally talking about an article he scheduled, right? I mean, he put on a... Now, whether or not an article like that should be part of his reading list, that's debatable. But it's clear that this professor, sort of philosophy professor, he's trying to be cagey and coy about saying but not saying, hey, maybe white people should kill themselves. But I thought, given that reading is in his syllabus, that to me is the bigger problem. Once you assign a reading like that, your job as a professor is to go through and play devil's advocate. And that's all he was doing. I'm not bothered by that. But you can see how cagey he's being. He clearly thinks that it's a legitimate possibility himself, but he's smart enough not to say it. So he's couching what he believes in this article. In other words, he's letting a so-called scholarly article make the argument he wants to make, because he knows he really can't make it himself. And so the problem is, once the article is assigned, he's playing devil's advocate. I've said this many times to my kids. If for whatever reason I were a history professor and we were reading Mein Kampf, I would at least, as we were going through it, try to get kids to understand how Hitler was thinking, not justify it, not adopt that thinking for themselves. But when you're reading a book, if you're going to take the time to read a book, you've got to at least make sure kids understand what's being said in it. So I think that the university offered a very squishy denial of this, but I think it's a fair denial in the sense that he doesn't come out and say what the article says. He brings you to the brink of that, and then says there might be something here. My question is, what kind of a class is this, and why would you have somebody who actually believes that as part of your reading list?
Yeah, so I'll get you all caught up. Basically what happened is this came out saying that Professor Derek Hook supported that white people, commit suicide and get rid of all the white people. And then Duquesne University had to come out on their website in a press release and say what he supposedly said is not true. According to the university, the statement attributed to Professor Hook is ridiculous and reckless. He did not make a statement advocating anything like what was suggested. In fact, he said that the statement in question was crazy. Professor Hook also said that the provocateur who used this example was wrong in suggesting any such radical action. The words being circulated were simply lifted out of context to distort the actual comments. Saying that Professor Hook called for anything like the words in question is false.
That's not true either, Duquesne. He didn't just absolutely condemn that. And he walks a tight line. And see, here's the problem with places like Duquesne. We have so bought into the idea that whiteness must be eradicated. We have so bought into the idea that whiteness, almost without ever really defining it, whiteness and by extension white people have to be done away with. And so, yeah, it's not quite that, Duquesne. I mean, he had a right to do what he did. I believe that if he had that book in his if that's the article that they were reading, he had a right to explain it. And he had a right to explain it that way and carry through to the logical conclusions of what the author was getting to. But Duquesne, while I agree that he is not guilty of basically saying that white people should kill themselves, he is theorizing away and imagining a circumstance in which it would be ethical. So you can't get away with that, I think, either way.
Well, and I guess my question, it goes back to kind of what you had said, is why, out of all the examples, I guess I don't know what was the purpose of the lesson? What was he trying to teach the students in that? Why is it this is what you select as the option? That's what right. We don't know.
And he started off talking about modern day South Africa. And what I know quite a bit about modern day South Africa, and it is not a situation where white people are living their lives in situations where they are looking down on black people anymore. In fact, being white in South Africa is to have your property confiscated. Your very life is threatened many times.
And it's interesting that he was from South Africa, quoting someone from South Africa, right. And he's in Pennsylvania. Well, those colonies, the old colonies in the United States, before they were the United States, they were the colonies, and they were full of those racist white men. Duh. And apparently, though, we didn't know this, but they also had LGBTQ people, and everyone now must be told all about it. Because now that LGBTQ people were there, then it's okay to talk positively about the colonies. No other reason other than that. We found the Virginia Gazette reporting that in Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg, where, yes, fact check, I was engaged there. A little fun fact for you. They reported that in Williamsburg, the education about Colonial Williamsburg will be changing to include LGBTQ stories. While reading through the 18th century historical records, Colonial Williamsburg's Gender and Sexuality Diversity Committee researcher, Ren Tolson.
Oh, there you go.
Why do we have
someone,
the Gender and Sexuality Diversity Committee researcher at Colonial Williamsburg? How did that position even come to be? Ren Tolson discovered that there was something telling buried within the hundreds of pages of land requisitions and court filings. What a job to dig through all of that. It was a pair of marriage license requests. What he found was the document told of an affluent land-owning Virginian woman. On her first attempt, she filed a marriage license to be wed to a woman who worked at her post office. It was denied, citing marriages were solely between a man and woman. Now, Tolson found that the next day, the woman had returned, dressed in traditionally male clothing and sporting a short haircut. Her request was then approved, granting her the right to marry a woman. Wow, what a story. So now, everything at Colonial Williamsburg must change to meet
Now you're going to open up Colonial Williamsburg to the LGBTQ. Trust me, next it's going to be trans Colonial Williams.
Well, they're already, the fact that she dressed as a man.
That's right.
So there was obviously thoughts in her mind of this.
Sure.
Now, according to Tolson, it's a glimpse into how Americans viewed gender and sexuality in the 17th and 18th centuries. Tolson said, though, that through research conducted at Colonial Williamsburg, they're piecing together a more complete history of LGBTQ people in colonial times. Good to know. Maybe we should just say, go way back when. Go back to Chris Columbus, and just say, I think he wore dresses.
That's what's happening.
So then now he can be accepted again.
What's happening now is they are resurrecting and actually creating out of whole cloth a huge, basically gay backstory to Western culture. That's what they're doing.
And they've been doing this for 2 years.
A long time.
So for 2 years, Colonial Williamsburg's foundation's researchers and historians have been diving deep into historical records to better understand the history of LGBTQ people living in the colonial period. Through their research, Tolson said they've made some remarkable discoveries that will soon be presented to the visitors. So it began fall 2019 with the creation of the Gender Diversity Committee. And initially, the goal of the committee was to conduct research, find examples, and create an internal guidebook for interpreters in order to better answer visitors' questions. So any random question that you come up with, start asking the Colonial Williamsburg people, because apparently they will eventually create a committee about it, and then you'll learn all about it. But while I was in Colonial Williamsburg, I did go on a haunted tour that the ghosts in town. So is there a committee devoted to just finding all the ghosts that supposedly live in Colonial Williamsburg as well? I hope so.
The revolution is here, and it's going to make you care. The revolution is going to reach back and change every aspect of history to progressive, to see it through progressive lenses. This is just the beginning. Although it does make me wonder what kind of unique takes on churning butter and wicking candles we can expect from Williamsburg in the future.
Now, this is the important part. According to the Foundation's Vice President of Education, Research, and Historical Interpretation, they like long titles there, Beth Kelly. Beth says that with all this history coming to light, that the foundation plans to introduce programs and reenactments geared towards educating the public on the LGBTQ history in the colonies. And back according to Tolson, Tolson says that LGBTQ people were more widely accepted than they had actually expected. So does that mean they're not, cool enough anymore? They're not unique enough
that
it's
mean
like
that
whatever.
Americans are not systemically racist
and
biased?
Maybe that's what that
maybe
means.
That's another one. Somehow that's not going to make the list, I'm quite sure. Time for us to take some time away from the endless hypocrisy and unintentionally hilarious nonsense of the public schools and take a look at some real education. Today, one of my favorite, and I think one of the least appreciated members of the Renaissance, the Renaissance and Baroque period. He's appreciated by art historians, but he's not on the lips and minds of everyday average art lovers. This is, of course, Gian Lorenzo Bernini. Take a look at a little picture of, there's a self-portrait of Bernini. So a very handsome man. He was quite the womanizer in his day. He was a well sought out, well compensated artist. One of the great figures of the Renaissance Baroque period. He was born, there's a self-portrait. Go to the first picture we're going to look at with regards to Bernini. This is his take on the famous statue of David. And it has a lot in common, it really is a wonderful thing to juxtapose this from Michelangelo, Michelangelo's Mannerist high Renaissance sculpture of the great saint, the great warrior saint. Here is another version of David in solid marble. And whereas Michelangelo's David was pensive, he was almost a little bit shy, he was lost in contemplation, thinking about God as he's got the slingshot over his shoulder. Here you have a very energetic and a very active David. He doesn't look quite as young. He doesn't look quite as unfinished yet as Michelangelo's David. Michelangelo's David does show a young boy on the cusp of becoming a man. This is, for all intents and purposes, this is a man. David portrayed as a man, and you can see behind him, he's got the slingshot in his hands, and he's got, among the things that are figured on the platform, you have a harp, which is kind of neat. It was the instrument that King David played, and we're told that many of the Psalms were created and sung by David by using that harp. So you have a sense of a David here that is much more active. Behind him as well, you see the rejected armor of Saul. Remember when the king wouldn't go out and fight Goliath, and none of the strong warriors of Israel dared challenge him. It was the shepherd boy, David, that actually went to war. Saul gave him his armor, but it was too big for David, and so he set it aside there. And you see a wonderful statement about faith in God, not faith in men. Armor and that kind of elaborate protection for battle is a man-made thing. David doesn't need man-made protections like battle armor. He just needs the deep faith he possesses in the God of the Israelites. And that's what we see here.
All right, before we go, let's show some love to our Patriot Club members. Today, we're going to give a shout out to Marco from Bismarck, North Dakota. Thank you, Marco.
All right, and that's our show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. And until next time, just stay educated, my friends.